Welcome everyone to the KQL Cafe of this month. It's May 2025. And today we have our guest Michalos, and later on his friend too. But for now, let's get started. So usually we have our good friend Alex, who is not available today, and he'll be there next time. Get started. So today's agenda, it's basically the same as usual. We give you a warm welcome. We discussed the... Oh wait, I'm not sharing, right? Oh. Also not good. Usually Alex does this. So, like I said, warm welcome. This time we'll have the KQL with me and Michalis. And hey. So, and let's get started. Okay, so what's new this month in KQL? We saw some things. There are 3 new tables in Microsoft Defender. They hold the message events, the message post delivery events, and the URL info. What it is, these are all the data that Defender is collecting from Microsoft Teams. So you can use that to hunt for malicious messages. You can see what kind of items there are shared. You can see what kind of messages are blocked. You can also do a bit of hunting on the URLs. So for instance, if you have a TI feed and you want to compare your TI against Teams messages for Teams phishing, that's now an option. So you can use these. Another new cool thing, here's the screenshot. So basically, you have the fish apps available for the messages, and you can do nice things. So next slide is the multi-tenancy is finally officially generally available. So from now on, you can query all your connected tenants over the multi-tenant portal, so mto.security.microsoft.com. And the main difference you'll notice is that you have nowadays a column for the tenant name. So you can see if you have 100 connected tenants, you can hunt over all 100, and you still can see which alert or which event belongs to which tenant, which is nice. And for the rest, it was not that busy this month. I think in the coming months there will be more releases. But for now, we can go to our good friends who made some really nice things. So Michalis and Christos, welcome.
Hi everyone. Hi Yanni. Thank you very much for the invitation and for having me at least again now with company this year, just to make it a little bit more interesting. So yeah, we've been working with Christos for something very interesting in order to bring to the community for KQL, and we kind of published it like, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 weeks, maybe 2 weeks ago. We've seen some reactions. We've seen some some feedback, at least not so much as expected, but I mean, we're very happy that it already has, let's say, being out there. So without not losing any more time, let's say, I'll share my screen in order to start our presentation. Just me make sure that I'm presenting correctly. One moment. So I guess you can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So, couple of things about me and Christos. So about me, I've been a Microsoft MVP since last year, since 2024, in security and specifically in the area of ZM and XDR. I've been a cybersecurity professional since 2019 and working in the ICT sector for over 12 years. I mostly blog about interesting stuff about CM and XDR, Microsoft Defender XDR in Michalos.net. And some of the projects that I curate is the KQL threat hunting queries repo in my GitHub repo, and also the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, the FIR resources where I have gathered, let's say, various resources that can help you, let's say, with Microsoft Defender to do some, remote acquisition or running some remote scripts that would help you, let's say, with digital forensic, stuff like that. So if you're following KQL, you've probably seen some of the queries and the work that I've done in KQL search, brought to you by Ugur Coates, a very good friend, and the Custo Insights, the monthly newsletter by, again, Ugur Coates and Bert-Jan Pals, which I think he was the last guest in KQLCafe, if I remember correct, right? Last month, yeah. And if you haven't yet, the book of Definitive Guide to KQL, you've probably seen some repos with KQL queries included. Mine was also mentioned in the book in the end as well. Very good book. If you haven't got it yet and you're working in the industry, then it's a very good resource. And handing over to you, Christos.
Okay, not so much about me. I would say it's like the let's say the weird fish in let's say in the bowl, meaning that I'm not I don't have a security background per se. I'm here as a DevOps engineer, so we are the literal, let's say, instantiation of DevSecOps, the cooperation of me and Michalis. So, like it says in this slide, I'm a DevOps engineer. I'm a Microsoft MVPs in two categories, the one being DevOps and the other one being infrastructure as code. I write up at my blog about various things, whether it is DevOps related, AI related, a bit of philosophy lately. I don't know. I felt like having a kind of a change in philosophy in context with technology. And I also publish a lot of open source tools because I have a very, let's say, developer oriented mindset. And this is, let's say, sKaleQL that we're going to present today with Michalis is an example of this open source, let's say, proclivity that I follow. That would cover it up. I don't know, back to Michalis.
Okay, so the main idea, let's say, that we had about sKaleQL was, so Christos is someone that has no background, let's say, in security. I've been talking a lot about data. All of us is talking a lot about data, especially when we work with Log Analytics Workspace, how we run queries, how can they be effective, how you can, run, how you, let's say, coordinate, orchestrate, automate, let's say, queries. So we do have, let's say, some tools provided within the platforms that we are already, let's say, have within Sentinel, Logic Apps, and other automation, let's say, within the same environment. So we thought, why wouldn't, let's say, take this query running and automating, let's say, and orchestrating, and take it outside of the space of Azure and Microsoft Sentinel, and place it somewhere safely where, again, you can run queries and get against your Log Analytics Workspace. So we came up with the idea, Christos mainly, to be honest, so we came up with the idea of, you know what, why wouldn't we, let's say, run queries within GitHub and automate them, or make them, let's say, have them, let's say, being run at scale. So we could, let's say, prepare a lot of KQL queries, build the input and output format of what we would like to receive as a result, and then run it remotely, let's say, from GitHub. And then we came up with sKaleQL. So sKaleQL is a template repository. So you can just, fork it, take it into your environment, maybe make it private so that you won't share anything, spicy, and prepare your KQL queries and then run them and get against Azure Log Analytics workspaces. So it has a structured approach in terms of what data do you expect, let's say, to have an input within the KQL query, and what data do you expect, and how do you want to present, let's say, the output based on the results that you expect, let's say, to receive. So that's one step. And the second is you can do it automatically, and there's a full documentation of how this tool works within the GitHub repo. So what one can do, let's say, with sKaleQL. So allow me to take you to the GitHub repo. We've collected here, let's say, some ideas that we were thinking. So you can do, let's say, health checks. So let's say daily you want to receive a report, you want to save, let's say, somewhere the results of a report about some sort of health check that you do. Just and before we begin with with a more structured, with going a little bit deeper, I wanted to say that this is not just security related stuff. This is any kind of data stuff. But given that they are saved within a log analytics workspace area within Microsoft Sentinel. So for any reason you might be working with a log analytics workspace, you can easily, let's say, take this tool and run queries against your from GitHub Actions, from GitHub to log analytics workspace. So automated health checks, security and threat monitoring. So you can run KQL queries, let's say, at scale, then collect the evidence. Compliance validation. I mean, anyone that works in a bank like me, or any other big places that have, regulation, they're heavily, let's say, regulated. You have, let's say, to provide evidence of having, let's say, some sort of controls, some sort of logging mechanisms. So this tool can help you towards that. It can help you in reporting, or even some sort of data export, because as we can see, as we will see later on, you can save in various, let's say, output formats. You can do some cost and usage monitoring. I've prepared an example about that. We will see it later on. Incident response automation that can help you, let's say, speed up investigations. Let's say you want to run 10, 20 queries, let's say, at once. You can have them, let's say, prepared. Give some, if you want, let's say, before you run them, you can give some specific, let's say, I don't know, maybe a user, an endpoint PC, or whatever, so that you can run, let's say, these queries, and you can save the output, the results, and you can go through it like you're doing an investigation. Business metrics, or even resource inventory tracking. So you can, let's say, detect anomalies in terms of, I'm monitoring, let's say, X servers at the moment within my environment. Next day, I'm monitoring, let's say, Z service in my environment, why there's a difference. So this is something that you may also want to consider taking action into with our tool. So what it can actually do is, let me take you back to the presentation. So this is more or less the architecture and how we have built it. So first step is, you need to have a log analytics workspace, obviously. The documentation about the installation and the part of Azure setup is quite straightforward. You just need to do an Azure app registration. you need to assign the specific RBAC, and then in order for you to able to connect this app registration with GitHub, you need to set up federated credentials within Azure. So if you want to look how this is being set up, let's say, it's quite easy. This is, let's say, the application. As you can see, if I go to my log analytics workspace, just give me a second about that. And you will see, first of all, let's say, first of all, you have created, let's say, the application. But if you go to the log analytics workspaces, if you go here and you go to access control, you can see that in here you may find this application right there, which it has already been assigned the role of log analytics log analytics reader. So this is exactly the role that we need to assign to the application in order for it to be able to run queries within the log analytics workspace. Next step, set up the federated credentials. So if you go to the application and go to certificates and secrets, you'll be able to set up the federated credentials right here. So it's quite easy. This is my, let's say, setup. This is where I've set up sKaleQL in my repository, in my GitHub, I'm sorry, with a secret repository. You just, if you're using, let's say, a personal repo, just put in your username, the name of the repository, and all the rest of the details. And it's quite easy and straightforward, let's say, to connect it to your environment. So this is what I've, let's say, forked into my my environment, and this is what I've connected, let's say, to my test environment, what I've already showed here. And this is like the first part where everything is orchestrated between GitHub and Azure. I don't know, Christo, do you want to add any comment here, or?
No, move on. We'll take it later.
Okay, so the next step would be to define, let's say, the configuration of queries first. So, and then define the queries that you want to run. You can also categorize them in folders, and then configure the queries output format. So you want them in JSON, you want them in YAML, TSV, TXT, CSV, I'm sorry, TXT. So there's a typo here. And even if you want them to be compressed into a zip file. So more or less, I've connected, let's say here, let me open this one now. So this is where you actually can see I've synced the repo right here. So these are the folders that you can save your KQL queries in, right? So this is like a very simple and straightforward KQL query, like taking device network events 24 hours ago, and just take anything related to device network events for the last 24 hours, and then another one, just for an example, all the device process events for the last 24 hours. So as soon as you have, let's say, within the library, a subfolder, in this case, we've named the device, you just need to take over and, define how you want them, let's say, the output of what's expected, let's say, to be presented at the output of the query. So another folder that we've prepared here today is log analytics workspace usage. Again, a little bit more, let's say, simpler in this part. Quite straightforward here as well. I mean, I just wanted to see the total usage of the last month, and also I wanted in this query to, let's say, calculate the total ingested megabytes for each table within my log analytics workspace. So I think this is a little bit more suitable for you, Christos, to take over and explain a couple of things.
Sure. Let me share my screen. Okay, everybody. Now, you're gonna have to bear with me. I'm a Lightning fan. I know. I have heard a lot of backlash about it, but I'm a hybrid fan, to be honest, meaning that automatically I have a tool here in Mac. When it gets dark outside, I switch to dark, and if it's morning, I stay in light. So, because we're approaching summer, let's stay with the light one. Okay, like Michalis said, the concept of this repository, first of all, it's a template, meaning that if you visit the link that I sent in the chat, you can use this template. And the template repository is a bit different than forking the repo. When you fork the repo, you can recommend direct changes and have them, and we see those, or you can pull the latest. Whereas if you use the template, it's like copy pasting the whole structure that it has currently and using it on your own. I recommend using it as a template, and if you want to suggest new changes, you can open up pull request, and I'm going to show you how. But and this is because some changes that might happen to the repository, because it's still the early days, might be, let's say, disruptive to your structure. Meaning that besides the main branch, we also have tags. So if we put a new version of it, which is called 2.0.0, that means that it's major change. So if you're not using a template with a fork and you pull from the latest change, it might mess up your work. Okay, that's the disclaimer here. So what's sKaleQL? I believe Michalis has covered that. Essentially, is a way to automate. Because I'm a DevOps, I bleed automation. I want to make things efficient, and I want to automate them as much as possible, especially if the processes are deterministic. And when we are running KQL queries, not always, but we can safely assume that a lot of the time the query itself is deterministic, and we would like perhaps to bundle or create a pack of queries that we want to run together at a specific point in time, at an interval that we want to choose. And perhaps have a bit of a configuration, let's say sugar on top of it, instead of having to do it manually for each query or running a CLI command. And that's the premise of the repo. It utilizes GitHub to host the code, of course, and then it utilizes two things. The one is GitHub Actions, which essentially is the offering that GitHub provides for running workflows. And here the cool thing is we're using GitHub infrastructure. We don't have to host our own agent to run this pipeline on top of. And we take care of authentication, like Michail showed case, with the service principal. So we know we are secure. And because this is a security, let's say, cafe, we are also using like federated and OpenID Connect if we want. So no passwords involved, no need to generate those secrets. We get rid of them, which is really cool. And then the other component is, like I said, I have a develop-oriented mindset. So I have written some code. What else could happen? Now you can twinkle with this code if you want, but do so at your own risk. Essentially, what I've written is a small Python script. You can find it added here, scripts KQL query executor, which essentially provides with these configuration capabilities over the queries that you want to run. So the premise, the concept is what? You use this template, and then you have a folder called library. This is where you put all your KQL queries. And because we want to offer the capability to run multiple queries at once, we categorize them into subfolders. For example, like Michalis showed case before, here I have a subfolder called device. Michalis had another subfolder. So queries that relate to one another and you want to run them together, you can put them, under one folder, which you can name whatever, let's say, makes sense to you and the queries. Now, what is, let's say, the anatomy of a folder? And we were going to use the device folder as an example here, but you can think of it as your own folder potentially. We have files with our queries, and we can have multiple files. No need to put all the queries in one file. From my POV, without being an expert at KQL, a file should have the logic that corresponds to its name. we are not, let's say, we don't have a limit of having like multiple files. It's easier to manage that way. And then let's say what offers this automation capability is this config file. This uses YAML. I believe all of us are familiar with YAML. And what we have done with Michalis is we have come up with our own schema. Like you have a schema for YAML for defining workflows, Kubernetes, etc. Here we have created our own schema. You can see the schema here, this JSON. This is like the schema definition. What are we expecting? What are the allowed values, etc. And this is an example of using that schema and giving it value. And the idea is what? Not to reinvent the wheel, but take all the options that you have when you run an Azure CLI command, and then simply put this in this config file so you can define it for multiple queries. So if we run an Azure CLI command for KQL, what options do we have? We have a format option, which means if it's the table, if it's JSON, if it's YAML. We have a query option, which essentially is a query on the query. It's kind of meta, but it's like we query the results that the KQL query brings back from the log analytics workspace. And this uses James path. And here you would put, this is like the YAML syntax for having multi-line. Here you would put exactly what you would put in the CLI command. So there is no, let's say, need to adjust to something new. You just have to adjust to this config schema. Otherwise, it's the exact similar things that you would put in your Azure CLI command. The only differentiation is here we need to define a version, because in the future we might change the schema and you might want to run with the previous version. So let's do so we have backwards compatibility. And then we have the queries. And here this is an array with all the queries that we want to run. If we don't specify anything here, there is some default option. If we do specify even one item in this array, then that means that only those specified will run. For example, here I say, okay, I want you to run the process event query. And here I define the output. I want to have one output which is in the table format for me to read from the portal. And I want to query this one, which is like the first 5 elements. But I also want to have a JSON representation, which is much more verbose, where I can do some analytics afterwards. I have stored it. And here is exactly that. So I specify the format, I specify a file, which is where am I going to store this. This is important because we might do some complex logs afterwards. Now, this, let's say, where am I going to store this applies if you run this locally. A big note I want to make is that you can use this with GitHub Actions, but if you want to and you download this repo locally, you can also use it with the Python script directly. So if you run it directly, then this would specify where do you put the output. If you use the GitHub Actions, which is we run the workflow on GitHub infrastructure, we don't need to specify this because the infrastructure is not our own, so we don't have access to it. We're going to upload it as an artifact. I hope that makes sense. So this argument makes sense if we are running locally. And then similarly, we do the same thing for the network events. We have an output for the format table, which is for us to see in the portal. And then we have the JSON. And here you can see we have added a bit, let's say, of a capability add-on, a really simple capability, which is to have some compression. Because if you have a lot of, let's say, data, you don't want to swamp your GitHub artifacts with that. Why not compress it and then download it and do a decompression on it? So this is an example config file. Now, if we run this, if I showcase here the workflow, which is execute queries, essentially what it does is, okay, workflow this month means I run it manually. Then I specify which folder I want to run. Here it would be the device. It's relative to the library, so you don't need to rewrite library. This is a convention we make amongst us that everything we put under library is the folder that we want to run. So if you want further complex logic, perhaps you could have nested subfolders. It's up to you. We want to give you the freedom to do so. But here we specify the folder that we want to run the queries that are inside, based on the configuration, of course. And then what we do is, of course, we check that the folder exists. We log into Azure. You see here, no client password. We install some analytics for the Azure CLI. We install Python, and then we simply run the script. So if you want to run the script manually, because the configuration, let's say orchestration on top, it's the schema with YAML and the Python script. You could do this from your own machine to test it once. But if you want to run this regularly, it's ideal to use the GitHub infrastructure. It's easier that way. And this way you don't have to authenticate yourselves. You are already using the OpenID. And here we upload the results. So you see here, we are uploading all the results that we want with the query results folder. Okay, this would be the idea. If we take a look at the previous executed workflow, you see, first of all, you can see here that this is the artifact. If I open it and it downloads itself, I'm going to open it up in a bit. So you see here all the actions that took place. And if we see here execute queries, this is the first table that we specified, the table format, which is what we want to see in the portal. And this is for the network events. And if I open up the query results folder, you see here we have two subfolders. The one is the one that we did the compression and the one that we did not. If I open here this JSON, you see we have everything, which everything that we chose with the query. So you can think of it there. I mean, you can have a very big number of potential use cases. And I believe people will try to use this tool in different ways, which is what we want, essentially. So the complex and let's say the capabilities that are offered essentially are focused on the schema and the Python script. The GitHub Actions workflow, you can use it, but it essentially does those steps for you using GitHub infrastructure, which is really convenient. Now, of course, everything that I mentioned here, I'm not expecting you to have memorized it. So the concept is that we have created the wiki. And you visit this wiki here, and it has all the information and end-to-end guides to set up your environment to be able to run the demo that Michalis, that is depicted in this repo. And of course, then you can enhance it with your own logic. So under home, we can see here we have some information. We have the disclaimer here for the device folder, meaning this device folder that we showcased this is an example. It's not meant for you to be used as the only option. Everything that resides under the library directory is valid. And then we have sub-pages with Azure, how to set up Azure with app registration, log analytics, permissions, creating the federated credentials. Then you also see here, we have a logical flow. You can configure GitHub. Okay, how do I use this template from GitHub? What variables do I need to set? How do I execute KQL queries? You see here, I'm specifying only the folder called device. The library is taken for granted. And we also say this in the comment here. And here, how we verify the results and how we can download the artifacts. The configuration options goes into detail of what is the schema and how you can populate it. And it goes into extensive detail. So if somebody wants to, let's say, take advantage of the full capabilities of the schema, he can do so by going over this and understanding it. We tried to make it as flexible as possible so we can enhance it in the future. And the idea was, instead of trying to put too much capabilities from early on, instead to provide you with a minimum, let's say, viable version of this repo, and then have you open and provide feedback with issues. For example, one might say, I want the capability to, if this query returns some result, and this could be binary, no results or some results, then I want to get notified because it means something to me. And perhaps this notification could be an email or a message in a Slack channel. This could also fall under the configuration, but we did not want to get ahead of ourselves. Instead, we wanted to get this feedback organically after people have tried it out. And the schema is flexible to support this kind of additions without having to change and be designed from scratch. So like you saw here, we have the output and the file, the main arguments for a query. The file specifies which query to run, and the output specifies what outputs do we want. We can specify more than one output. Perhaps we want a more verbose output for the portal for us, and then we also want the extensive output to be stored as JSON and uploaded as an artifact. And you can see here the arguments for output. You can see here some rules and the default options. So you see here, by default, all files in the folder are executed with JSON output. If you don't give any configuration file in a folder, that will happen. We will run all the KQL files in the folder, and you will produce the JSON output, which is what we get from Azure API. So it's like the least disruptive approach. What we get, we simply print it to the console. We don't do anything else, which is like the best thing to do when we are talking about default behavior. And then you can also see here the extension, more detail for behavior, and then some example with basic configuration, multiple queries with custom outputs, custom query, James path query, meaning the query of the query, which it's a bit, let's say, awkward, but it's also what Azure CLI uses. So for the purpose of being not having to, let's say, extend the learning curve to the users, we simply use the exact same argument names that the Azure CLI command offers. And then for the next step, we have the usage guide, which is how to use it. Like I said, we can use it with GitHub Actions, and we have here a recommended configuration file and why this is a recommendation, of course. And then we can also have the execution with the Python. How do you set up Python and how do you run this if you want to test it locally before uploading it? And how you can view results. You can see here I've also tested in my machine. I know that's not always convincing, but it's the best that we can do. We have written some tests, we have tested on our machines, we have tested on GitHub. So if you find an issue, open it up and we will fix it. That's the whole idea of this. This is an open source project. And you have here again some scenarios. That's the idea with usage. And if you want to provide feedback, which is very valuable to us, whether it is a bug that you want to report or a capability that you want to be added, what you're going to do is you're going to go to issues, you're going to click new issue, and you see here we have some templates, bug report, and you see here we have a template with details on how to fill out this report. You can also hit the preview here to see how it looks to us. So what's the description? What was the behavior you expected? What happened? How can we reproduce it? Of course, you don't feel the need to provide everything here, but if you have the information, the more verbose we are, the better, let's say, the troubleshooting will happen. And if you want to instead ask for a new capability or enhancement, you are requesting a feature. So similarly here, what do you want? What the context? What are the use cases? How could it be implemented? Of course, don't feel obliged to put this in. We will think of the implementation, but perhaps you have an idea. We are open to that. And also on how to provide this feedback, we also have this page here called feedback, which essentially is how do you use this template, what a showcase here, how to fill this out. So the goal was to provide you with extensive documentation because we know this is something new and perhaps people from the security world are not as well versed, which is understandable as DevOps and developers with GitHub. So the idea is to make it as digestible as possible, provide you with all the documentation so you can spin up a new repo with your own environment and quickly test out this. And then, of course, come back with feedback, come back with bugs, come back with feature requests. And the idea is to have this repo be a thing that's alive and dynamic and gets more complicated as time progresses if it serves the purpose of offering capabilities that you, the consumers, let's say, of this repo, feel that they are needed. I kind of, let's say, snowballed the discussion, so I'm going to kick it back to Michalis.
No worries. Very good. Let's say, good to know that, there are fields outside of security sometimes, right? I can see Yanni already smiling, but yeah, yes. That's the idea. But that's what we've built. Let's say, I mean, that's the amazing thing, and that's what we enjoyed between us because we both come from very different, let's say, backgrounds. Christos is, a DevOps guy. I'm a security guy. So we, let's say, took some time together, and we came up with this tool. And we really, really, really hope it's going to be helpful for you guys. Yanni, I can see you unmiked your mic. Do you want to ask something or comment?
I think we should do something like a hackathon one day we should use this in a hackathon style because you have so many purposes for this because you can run queries, but you could also think maybe I want a monthly report of my vulnerability management data, or you know, the phishing simulation data in Defender, it's okay, but you don't have a nice report. And with this, you can create really nice reports with the built-in phishing tool, for instance.
The idea is that you can, of course, this is a template. So the idea is you get the template and then you can enhance it. Perhaps the GitHub Actions workflow, you can, it's really simple to understand for basic users. So you can, for example, put some other steps that do some, let's say, actions on the provided JSON, or you update the output JSON. And then you can, let's say, this is your logic, of course. We could not predict what everybody wants to do. And this is I believe, also the cool stuff, that we're equipping everybody with a tool set. And then it's up to them and their imagination and their use cases to enhance it however they see fit.
So like a very just, Yanni, talking security, right? A very small example that I've been thinking to do practically, let's say my day-to-day job is, I don't want to give access to Defender XDR to system administrators, right? And probably I don't want to use any other resources using a logic app and building, let's say, an automation in order to send them results with regards to Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management, which is like a cooperated, let's say, area that we work closely with the IT teams. So imagine, let's say, building like a weekly report or a monthly report that you can just, build it and make it, let's say, available in their environment so that they can download it and see, like, I don't know, maybe top 10 vulnerabilities in your environment, top critical, let's say, vulnerabilities in your environment, etc., etc. So you can, depending, let's say, on what you're working and how you're working, you can do like whatever you want. So before, let's say, we accept any questions about what we discussed, so one thing we wanted to present about considerations of what we are working on at the moment is that what we faced is that there might be some issues when running queries through GitHub Actions. So it's a very good idea, since this tool simulates basically the Azure CLI, that maybe you could run, let's say, you could prepare, let's say, your queries within your advanced hunting area, but it would be a very good idea to test them before within the Azure CLI so that you can see actually what kind of results do you expect, let's say, to see in the tool, because there are some, let's say, challenges that we faced. If you do any tricks that we might do in advanced hunting, sometimes within the Azure CLI they don't work properly. So sometimes it's good to test before in Azure CLI. Next thing that we are
like Michalis said, let's jump in, is test is something that doesn't work, test with Azure CLI. And because this is a wrapper around CLI, it does not add any, let's say, complex logic on top of it. So perhaps you have missed some of the syntax in regards to James path with a ---- query option. And then that will result in not working in GitHub Actions. But even it does not work in GitHub Actions, it will provide you with the error output of the command. So it will be easy to distinguish, okay, where is this fault? Oh, it's in the ---- query. I have an invalid James path. Let me test it a bit with Azure CLI to make sure I have it right. Because this tool does not correct, let's say, invalid input, what it does essentially, it just runs this with a wrapper around the CLI. And it allows you to do so at scale. That's the idea.
So what Christos has been talking about now, it's here specifically. So if you go to the execution of the flow, you can already see here that something wrong with the query, might need, let's say, to look into it again. And this is when
but you see, if you go a bit down, Michalis, you see it says error details, argument ---- query, invalid James path type. So that means that the query with the James path that we provided is not valid. So we know where to search and what to fix.
Yeah.
It does not leave you blind. That's what I'm going with that.
Exactly. So next thing that we were thinking of is, and maybe some considerations of what we'd like to see, let's say, from the tool is how we can make use of the data results. So something is being saved within GitHub. Can we? What would be, let's say, good use of that? Should we save it in the blob storage? Should we send the results within a Slack channel? Teams, whatever, let's say, depending on the the requirements and how each one works. That's sky's the limit. I mean, we're looking for ideas on where to focus further on that. Next thing is how we could automate further. Yeah, how we could maybe automate it further, how we can schedule it, how we can do further, let's say, how we can make it, let's say, far more robust in terms of making your life easier, because it takes some time, let's say, to prepare it, takes some time to build the tool, and then you need to spend the least, let's say, time you have available in order to maintain it. And the last one, yeah, I mean, how to build notification, more or less the same with the second point, like, apart from the email that's being sent from GitHub itself, like, you might want to receive something further, you want to get a screenshot of something or whatever. So,
but keep in mind, guys, that when we're talking about this kind of feedback, you have to factor in that it should be applied, let's say, more holistically. So if we do exchange, it should be something that could benefit a lot of people. So for the notifications, what we have thought of that can be applied, let's say, horizontally, it would be a binary rule. If I get results, that means something went right or wrong, or in the contrast, if I don't get results, something went right or wrong, and then have an email. Because if we go down to, let's say, inferring and, let's say, analyzing the data, you can understand that everybody has different data and they interpret it in different ways. So that would not be scalable. We would not be talking about sKaleQL. We offer you the capability to do so yourself, let's say, add the capability. But if we want to have a capability that's going to apply it for a lot of people, then perhaps the idea should be something that can be applied, let's say, in a lot of cases. That's just what I want to pitch in.
So yeah, we're looking for your ideas. We're looking forward, let's say, for your contributions. Yanni already shared the GitHub repo. Please, even if you don't have something in your mind, maybe by looking into it, by browsing it, you might probably think something, come up with an idea that might benefit the rest of the people. So please have a look. And have a taste and feel of what this tool could be and how it could benefit in your daily operations. And with that said, Christos, I think we're over. We said everything.
Yes.
Nothing further, let's say. I think Yanni would agree that if you have any questions, if you have any remarks or anything that might be of interest, if you have, please feel free to jump in and ask. We are more than happy, let's say, to discuss and provide insights and ideas about what we've built. No, probably. Okay.
I mean, it was a huge dump of knowledge.
Yeah.
With things like that, you need to get hands-on. That's the truth. You need to tinker a bit and try out things and see why they work. But my advice would be to go over the wiki. We spend, let's say, almost as much time developing the wiki as we did the tool itself. So to make sure that it's like very comprehensive. Of course, nothing is absolute, but I would say the job here has been as, let's say, as thorough as possible to make sure that we guide you step by step throughout the whole process.
Yeah, exactly. And keep in mind that it's not just a security thing. I mean, that's why maybe there's a ton of information. It's both of a security and DevOps thing, right, Yanni?
Yes. I think also for me, it's always when I do build things, it's usually in Azure DevOps, because for people, it's also a bit, how does GitHub interact, because if you are a small, medium business, putting things on GitHub always has a bit of a gut feeling because you don't want to post things on the internet. So I think it's good to know that you can mark your repository as private, and you should always monitor, of
Yes.
course. But it's an interesting project also because you're delivering the framework.
Yeah. So yeah, that's all from us. I mean, we are available if you want to reach out and ask something or give feedback. Most probably you'll be able, let's say, to see the video as well if you want like a quick recap later on. Yanni and Alex will post it. So yeah, Yanni, the floor is yours.
Yes, one small question. Are you guys doing any recording on, you have everything how to put it together on GitHub, but are you also making a small video just, hey, if you start from scratch, this is what it will look like?
It's on the roadmap to do
Nice.
so, to have a tutorial. May is always, let's say, a tricky month. It's the end of spring, the start of summer, so but the idea is to have it to let's say schedule it and have, let's say, a video tutorial of where we go step by step throughout creating this up to running, let's say, a custom folder with some queries.
Yeah. So our hometowns are very close, Yanni, so most probably we're gonna spend some time together in the summer, probably preparing that as well.
Nice. Sounds good. I think I'll take the screen share back. If there are any questions? Yes, not. But then also, like Michalis said, if you have any questions, you know where to reach out for the guys, give them ask, and they will help you. So
Sure.
then it's getting back to this one, reading view, share, window, PowerPoint.
Okay, so I guess Yanni would close the sKaleQL aspect, I believe, since no questions asked.
Yeah, Yanni, Christos is not familiar with KQLCafe, so
Okay, yes, because I
Christos,
need to drop the. I joined impromptu. I'm actually at another event which I was a speaker, and I requested for a back room to be able to give this presentation. So I'm like in the back room of a hotel right now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Christos, you can go. Yanni
Okay.
will continue.
Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having us, and I'm, let's say, intrigued to hear back from you and your feedback. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Then I'll go back to the deck. Share. Here he is. Okay. I think you should be able to see the deck again. Good. So, as usual in KQLCafe, we have several components, and now we're at the learning KQL, where this month I wanted to show some small thing how you can pack some data, because often you have data in several layers, and a good operator is the pack operator, which I'll show in a small demo. Zoom this a bit out. So basically in Defender, we have a table called alert evidence. And over here, we have all this data. So we have in the table, we have alert IDs. As you can see, there are several records per alert ID. And the data also contains the title, and it contains all the goodness. Over here we have machine information, IP information, but it's all a bit scattered. So for instance, if we want to see, hey, which are all the IP addresses related to a specific alert, we can do a filter on the entity type IP address. And that way we get, well, of course, all the alerts, but still we need a fun way to collect. So what we'll do is we'll make a pack, and a pack basically creates a dynamic array based on the values you give, the keys you give, and the values you add. So that way it can create a dynamic for you. And in this case, what we do is if we run it, then we have a nice IP object. So in this case, we can see, hey, the title was this, and the remote IP triggered on was this. Now we can do a summarize to make an overview of all the information. The last record wasn't needed actually. And now we can see, for instance, that from this alert, we have, go to list IP addresses, we have all this several IP addresses or differing ports. So as you can imagine, this is a good way to quickly see, hey, did we have any strange IP addresses related? And this way you can also quickly add them to maybe your report to see, what kind of other devices, for instance, had connections to those IP addresses. Same thing, of course, you can do with processes. Then we use again the pack operator. We do title, file name, SHA hash, and the command line. But that's also interesting to see, hey, what kind of alerts or what kind of command lines did they use for this specific alert. So for instance, if we detect run ones doing child processes, we can see there were two command lines in this case, one for the run once, and one was for the .NET installations. In this case, this is a false positive because I was installing something. But as you can imagine, if you have a complex alert, it can really help sort things out. In this case, we have local account discovery. Also, this is a short one, but if you run, for instance, a Pink Castle or a Purple Knight or a Azure Hound Bloodhound tool, then you will get a nice overview of all commands used in a specific alert. I think that one was a really nice short one to demonstrate one of the other operators. And if we go back to the deck. It's also what have you done this month? And this month I was playing to detect PowerShell running a child process which was doing network events. And as you can see in the bottom half of the bottom part of the query, I had to do a bit of playing with data because as you might or might not know, if you do invoke PowerShell with -w space h, that's enough to do a Windows style hidden. But basically PowerShell accepts all combinations. So when thinking, this was the most logical option. So what I'll do is I'll show the query for a second, and I'll also show the even better way, because I was fuzzing a bit more with the data. Alex. So if we go here, first of all, we do connections. So basically, I want to see the connection of PowerShell doing network connection. So we have 11 records in this case. Based on the timestamp, this was all when I just entered now some commands to trigger these. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that it's the child process of PowerShell. So what we do is we join a kindness in it because we don't want to miss anything. And then we join it on device ID and we say, hey, we want to match where the process parent in the device network event is the same as the initiating process in the device process events. And we also want to make sure that the IDs are the same, so you don't have an intersection between two different processes running at the same time. If we run this, then we also have still the 11 records, but now if we scroll to the right, we have a match because we see that's if there's duplicate column names, then they will append the one to the columns. In this case, we have a match on all the records. So next, if we do this, we say basically, hey, we only want to see the records which have launched PowerShell where the parent was launching something to hide. In this case, if we scroll here, you can see PowerShell because I didn't invoke a web request to my domain name. So it connected to several places. As we can see here, it's connected to my domain. But there was also the Google APIs, the fonts. There was the lesson script for the certificate. So basically, this works quite nice if you want to find any hidden PowerShells, or in this case, PowerShell running hidden child process doing things. But then, yeah, the query wasn't looking that good, so I started playing a bit with regex. And from the regex, what I basically was playing with, if we do the same, we can use, instead of the big fan of words, we can also use matches regex. And we do the question mark I to make it case sensitive. And then it's basically fully typed out. But what I did here was the -W, they always occur. And then the question mark is basically it has 0 or 1 occurrences. So it can happen that some of the words, if you would have a W, O, W, and then space, something that it would also return, but I haven't figured out a lot of records, found a lot of records where this would happen. So basically, if we run the query, this PowerShell Windows hidden is the same as the big fan of words upstairs because of the way that it works. So that was basically what I did this month. Back to the deck. I think that's almost it. We do have a small things to share because last year we did a CustoCon on the 8th of November. And this year we will hold it on the 6th of November. We do it in the Microsoft office in Zurich, where we have a lot of good speakers, more or less the same ones as last year. But we also have Michalis, who will do a submission, and we have Ugur Koch from the Gluck and Kanye, who also will have a nice presentation. So we'll have a nice, good event, and I will open the registration later tonight. And basically the idea is we have 2 registration on the page. One will be for the in-person event, because for the in-person event, we'll have a small workshop in the morning where we'll discuss some detection engineering. We have a nice use case where Bertjan and I will guide you through and do some detection engineering on that. And then in the afternoon, you can attend the sessions live. And also we'll have a second registration for the online, for the stream. So you can view the sessions online. And that one is free. And you can join it. We're still the idea of the recording is the same. We have to produce, and Alex and I and Franz were not media producers, so we try always to post the recordings, but the main focus is to delivering a good experience for the people in Zurich, but also for the people in the Teams calls. So if we can, we'll post the recordings, but don't tie us to that yet. So and then with that, I want to thank you all for joining, and see you next month. Thank you.
Bye, everyone, and thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Michalis.